Relationships are exciting. They're the most important aspect of our lives. Our relationship with our parents, boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife, children, grandchildren, friends, and so on. Christianity is first and foremost about relationships rather than rules. It's about a person more than a philosophy. It's about the most important relationship of all, our relationship with the God who made us. Jesus said that the first and greatest commandment is to love God. The second is to love our neighbour. So it's also about our relationships with other people. You and I were created to live in a relationship with God. Until we find that relationship, there'll always be something missing in our lives. As a result, we're often aware of a gap. A famous rock singer described it by saying, "I've got an emptiness deep inside." One woman described it as a deep void. Another young girl spoke of a chunk missing in her soul. Well, people try to fill this emptiness in various ways. Some people try to close the gap with money, but it doesn't satisfy. Aristotle Onassis, who was one of the richest men in the world, said, at the end of his life, "Millions do not always add up to what a man needs out of life." Others try drugs or excess alcohol or sexual promiscuity. One girl said, "These things provide instant gratification, but they leave you feeling hollow afterwards." Still others try hard work, music, sport, or seek success. There might not be anything wrong with these in themselves, but they do not satisfy that hunger deep inside every human being. Even the closest human relationships, wonderful though they are, do not themselves completely satisfy. Nothing will fill this gap except the relationship with God for which we were made. According to the New Testament, the reason for this emptiness is that men and women have turned their backs on God. Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." He is the only one who can satisfy our deepest hunger because he's the one who makes it possible for our relationship with God to be restored. Firstly, he satisfies our hunger for meaning and purpose in life. At some point, everyone asks the question, "What am I doing on earth?" or "Is there any purpose to life?" As Albert Camus once said, "Man cannot live without meaning." Until we're living in a relationship with God, we will never find the true meaning and purpose of life. Secondly, he satisfies our hunger for life beyond death. Before I was a Christian, I didn't like to think about the subject of death. Death seemed a long way in the future. We don't know what's going to happen, and we don't want to think about it. We fail to face up to reality. The fact is that we will all die. Yet God has set eternity in the human heart. Most people don't want to die. We long to survive beyond death. Only in Jesus Christ do we find eternal life, because our relationship with God, which starts now, survives death and goes on into eternity. Thirdly, he satisfies our hunger for forgiveness. If we're honest, we'd have to admit that we all do things that we know are wrong. Sometimes we do things of which we are deeply ashamed. More than that, there is a self-centeredness about our lives which spoils them. Jesus said, "What comes out of you is what makes you unclean. For from within, out of your hearts, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and make you unclean." Our greatest need, in fact, is for forgiveness. Just as someone who has cancer needs a doctor, whether they realize it or not, so we need forgiveness, whether we realize it or not. By his death on the cross, Jesus made it possible for us to be forgiven and brought back into a relationship with God. In this way, he supplied the answer to our deepest need. So why bother with Jesus? Why should we bother with Christianity? The simple answer is, because it's true. If Christianity is not true, we're wasting our time. If it is true, then it must be of vital importance to every human being. But how do we know it's true? We can test the claims of Christianity because it's an historical faith. It's based on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Our faith is based on firm historical evidence. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the most remarkable man who ever lived. He's the centerpiece of our civilization. After all, we call what happened before him BC, and what happened after him AD. Jesus was, and is, the Son of God. Some people think he's just a good religious teacher. However, that suggestion doesn't fit with the facts. Firstly, his claims. Jesus claimed to be the unique Son of God on an equal footing with God. He assumed the authority to forgive sins. He said that one day he'd judge the world, and that what would matter then would be how we'd responded to him in this life. C.S. Lewis pointed out that a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He'd either be insane or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice, he writes. So either Jesus was and is the Son of God, or else he was insane or evil. But C.S. Lewis goes on, let us not come up with any patronising nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He's not left that open to us. He didn't intend to. Secondly, his character. Many people who do not profess to be Christians regard Jesus as the supreme example of a selfless life. Dostoevsky, himself a Christian, said, I believe there is no one lovelier, deeper, more sympathetic and more perfect than Jesus. I say to myself with jealous love that not only is there no one else like him, but there could never be anyone like him. As far as his teaching's concerned, there seems to be general agreement that it's the purest and best ever to have fallen from human lips. To C.S. Lewis, it seemed clear that he could neither have been insane or evil, and thus he concludes, however strange or terrifying or unlikely it may seem, I have to accept the view that he was and is God.